So welcome to the finals countdown. This is our workshop designed to help walk you through the process of preparing and taking your finals. And so since we have a small group today, I want you to feel free to let me know if you have any questions. You can just go ahead and kind of unmute yourself when I'm in between slides. If you want to ask anything. So yeah, thanks for being here today. My name is Zach McDaniel. I'm one of the student success advisors in the College of Arts and Letters. And I hope you are able to take away a couple useful tips and tricks from this workshop. Well, let's get going. All right. Normally I have the final countdown playing in the background because I think it's really funny. But because I'm recording this and it may or may not end up on YouTube, at some point I want to avoid copyright strikes, so we're muting that. All right, so today's goal, I always like to set a goal for a workshop so we're all on the same page about what I'm hoping you all get out of this, and you can kind of identify what I'm hoping you get out of this. So I want you to be able to identify strategies that you can implement to prepare for and complete your final exams. That's my goal for you. I wanted to open up the discussion to see if you all had specific goals for this workshop or things you wanted to get out of this today, so I can make sure I specifically cover those. And if not, that's okay. If something comes up later, or if you have a question on something, feel free just unmute yourself and ask, and otherwise we will keep going. Before we dive into the preparation for final exams, I want to talk some myths about studying. There's this assumption that if you study more, if you put more hours into your studying, that you're going to get a better grade. Now that may be true, as just kind of the more you do something, the more you practice, the better you are. However, it's not a given. What's actually more important is the quality of your studying and making sure you're actually understanding the material. Because a lot of times we just treat studying as rereading something, and that's really just not an effective strategy, research has shown. Another thing I hear often from students, I said this myself as a student, was that cramming works. And yes, cramming might help you cover material for an exam, pulling an all-nighter the night before a test. However, it's really not going to help you when it comes to long-term retention of the material. So if this is something that's really important for you to actually learn and understand to be able to use in your career in the long term, cramming is not going to help you. Computer notes are better. I think a lot of us have really taken to technology, and so when it comes to in-person classes or even our virtual classes, we want to take notes on our computer. Yes, it might be efficient. However, it's not as effective for learning and memorization as taking notes by hand. We'll talk about it a little later, but the act of physically writing something out also contributes to your learning and memorization. There's also the myth that you only need to study one thing at a time. I've got a Spanish test tomorrow, so I'm going to study for 4 hours straight. Usually you're going to start losing focus after that first hour, and then you're just wasting your time. We'll talk about strategies later that talk about how you can switch back and forth between different subjects to stay fresh and to also help increase your memorization of the material. There's also the idea that you can study too early, that if you start studying too far out, you're going to forget it all. That's not true. We'll talk more about why that is not the case. Myths about studying: who needs sleep? Basically, it's that you can push yourself, pull all-nighters without sleep, and do well in your exams. It just doesn't work. It might work once or twice, but in the long run, it's really not going to help you with your learning. And the final myth is that finals are everything. We put a lot of our emphasis on finals and how we do on those exams as a testament to our own abilities, or as proof of how much work we put in. And sometimes the final just doesn't reflect all the work you put in. And so it's important to make sure that you're putting the final exam in perspective of all the work you've done and all the things you have achieved and will achieve going forward. So they're just some things I wanted to address before we start diving into some of these study strategies for finals. All right. So let's talk about the lead up to taking your exams. First of all, the first thing you want to do is you want to know when and where you're taking your finals. So, and that's going to look different now that you're doing them virtually versus when you're doing them in person. You can check the registrar's website to see when you're scheduled to take your finals for your class. It's usually based on the day and time your class is held. However, some professors might offer your finals at different times. So it's important to check your syllabus and also to check in with the professor, because things might have changed depending on how your class has gone this semester. You're also going to want to know how much time you have on the test so that you can use that in your preparation. You're going to want to ask what kind of questions are going to be on the exam. You can ask those to your professor. Don't feel like you can't. They should tell you if you're going to have essay types or multiple choice or short answers, fill in the blank, matching, whatever it is. They should let you know before the exam so that that's how you can study and be prepared. So make sure you do talk to your professors and that you are fully in the know about what they expect when it comes to what's going to be on your final exam. 2, make a study outline. So using your syllabus as a guide to build your study guide is, I think, the easiest thing you can do when you start planning your study schedule. So looking through the different topics that your professor has assigned is going to be kind of a key indicator of what you can expect on the exam. If they think it's this chapter is important enough to put in the syllabus, it's probably going to be in the exam at some point. Think like your instructor. What kind of questions do they like to ask on homework or in class? You're likely to see similar questions, if not those same questions, on your exam. So if they like to ask you about quotes or the little things in the margins of your textbook, or they like to ask you about the bolded definitions, or they use the questions from the book, use those to study and prepare for your exam. Make sure you're pulling from your homework, your tests, your past quizzes. Sometimes your professors won't give you those in person to take home with you, so you might have to go to their office hours to look over them. But try to do that. Use those past examples to help you plan going forward for your finals, because those should ideally be reflective of what to expect. And I have a handout for you if we were doing this in person. It's basically, I encourage you to look at your syllabus. It was kind of just showing you what an example of that might look like. Create a study schedule. Okay, so we've talked about what we need to study and how we can figure that out, but we need to figure out when we're going to study for it. So the first thing you're going to want to think about is where you're going to study. So you're probably a little bit limited on that right now. In an ideal world, you'd have the library and empty classrooms and different study spaces on campus. Right now, you're probably at home. Some places might be opening back up, some maybe libraries or parks or restaurants. And so if you can find a place that works for you, that where you can avoid distractions, and that could be distractions of internet, of phone, of people, of pets, whatever's a distraction to you, try to minimize that during your study time. Figure out what are the critical activities. You know, what do you feel like you need to study the most, and what do you feel that you're a little more competent in, and make sure you're prioritizing the things you think are going to need a little more work. I encourage you to create accountability. If you are going to be studying and you say, you know what, I'm studying for 3 hours every evening, tell people, tell your family, tell your friends, A, so that they don't become distractions themselves, but B, so that they can also have buy-in to your goals and to your education, and they can support you and they can help hold you accountable. I encourage people to use study groups. I think they're very helpful, more for review than your initial studying. Oftentimes, we'll get in study groups and we'll be potentially learning things for the first time. Sometimes it might be you've never read certain chapters or done certain questions. What's really helpful is to do that studying on your own and then bring it to your study group to review. Ask the questions that come up, where the things that you aren't sure of, and then share that, reinforce the studying you already did on your own in a group. Now, I would also, if we were doing this in person, I'd be giving you a handout with a schedule builder, and really that's just an empty timetable that you can use to fill in when you want to study on any given day throughout the week. Your classes are typically designed where you'll be spending 2 to 3 hours outside of class for every hour you're in class. And so once the assignments are finished and you just have tests to prepare for, you should be thinking, okay, if I've got class 3 hours this week, I should be spending 6 to 9 hours outside of class studying and preparing for my finals, doing my final papers, that kind of thing. And so as you're looking at your schedule, figure out where you can block that time in. And then try to stick with it. The more consistent you are with your schedule, the more likely you are to do it. And I mean, that can be consistency every day, or that can be consistency across a week. If you're changing it every day for weeks and weeks, it's going to be harder and harder to stick to because you don't have that set routine. And I hope that makes sense. Please, again, unmute yourself and let me know if you have any questions about anything I'm going over so far. Happy to answer questions. All right, part of preparing for your exams is also making sure you're taking care of your health. Exams and test taking are highly stressful activities. For some people, it's their biggest fear. And so you want to make sure you're taking care of your own mental and physical health while you prepare. So that includes making sure you're getting study breaks. We'll talk about one strategy for that later, but often I like to make sure that every hour I'm getting up and walking around for 5 or 10 minutes. And with that, make sure you're getting some exercise, whether you're using a workout video or you're getting outside for a walk or your run, you're taking the dog out. Make sure that you're moving your body because that'll help, keep the blood flowing and helping your brain stay healthy and engaged. Make sure you're getting enough sleep. Oftentimes, this is where we sacrifice the most when it comes to adding more study time. And you really need to make sure you're getting enough sleep so that your body has the chance to rest and recover and retain the information that you're studying. If you're pushing your brain past its limitations and you're not getting enough sleep to recover, your brain is really going to struggle to retain all the information you're studying. So make sure you're including sleep into your study schedule. I know there's some studies out there that say y'all should be getting 7 to 9 hours a night of sleep. I know that's not the most practical. So my typical suggestion is try to get at least 6, but every one of you is going to be unique and have your own needs. And so just work with what you need. I also encourage students to identify your de-stressor, whether that's a pet, a TV show, music. Find something that helps you de-stress and build time in your schedule to spend time with that to help you balance out the intense stress that can come with studying and preparing for finals. And finally, if you feel like you're reaching your critical mass, you're at a point where it's just too much, or you need to talk to someone and work through some of the stress, know we have counseling and psych services on campus available for you. That's their phone number on screen, but they do have a more interactive and responsive website, and so I encourage you to look them up. That's a free resource to students, and so I know they also have some stress management tools and resources available through them if you want to take advantage of that. All right, I encourage you to identify your support network because you are not going through this alone. There's thousands and thousands of other students like yourselves preparing for finals. So just know that you're already in a support network of each other. You're all going through a very, very similar situation as you prepare for these final exams. So, um, you know, the first person you might look to, first people you might look to are your peers to rely on for support amongst each other. However, we also have a lot of other resources on campus that are available to support you. We have the Writing Center. They are doing virtual appointments. If you haven't used them, they're a great resource to use to help strengthen your paper. If you've got final papers you're working on, make an appointment with the Writing Center. Have them looked over your drafts and see if there are ways where you can tighten up certain parts or strengthen certain parts of your paper. They're a great resource to use. The Math Center is available. I know math isn't the biggest our most popular subject amongst Cal students. However, y'all have to take math at some point, whether it's statistics or it's a more or just a different type of math. We have the Math Resource Center on campus, and they do virtual tutoring as well. So they can be a great resource to support you. You don't have to struggle alone in your math class. No, there's help on campus. Your advisors are a great resource. You have your major advisor. You have your general academic advisors. You have us, myself and my colleague Michelle in the Student Success Center. We're also advisors here to help support you. And so we're also resources if you need further support. Outside of this workshop, I'm available to work with students if you want help preparing for your exams. Your family, they may not be an office on campus, but they are also a support resource. Your family wants you to succeed in this. You are investing so much time and they are investing a lot of time supporting you. So let them know what you need. Let them know how they can support you. Ask them for their support, whether it's to help manage your distractions, for accountability, if you need extra help maintaining your health and de-stressing while preparing for finals, let them know. I also mentioned we have counseling and psych services on campus. We have SASE, the Student Ability Success Center. If you have a disability or you need extra support with testing, like more testing time, get in touch with the Student Ability Success Center and see if they can support you and help get you resources that you might need to be successful on your tests. And finally, the library. Even if the library is not open right now physically, there's still so many virtual resources, and the librarians are on call virtually if you need their support in getting research material for an exam or for a final paper. So this is just some of the resources on campus. There are plenty more to take advantage of that you might have been aware of or introduced to. So make sure you're taking advantage of all these people who are in your court that want you to succeed, because sometimes we could all use a little help. All right, here I wanted to talk about some specific study strategies. I usually go over these in our study strategies workshop, but I think it's never a bad idea to review some of these, especially if you've never heard of them before. One of the ones I mentioned earlier where you switch between different subjects is called interleaving. If you study Spanish, then math, then history, back to back to back, you're more likely to remember the information from each one because you're able to keep your focus for a shorter amount of time on a specific subject. And then as you switch to a different one, you start to notice the differences in the material and how you have to study it to retain it. And so it helps keep things fresher in your brain. And similar with that, over on the right, we have this thing called space practicing, where if you space out your studying into smaller chunks, instead of doing it all at once, your brain is forced to constantly be pulling that information from your short-term memory, and that helps move it into your long-term memory. If you study it just once, your brain isn't going to do that. You think about like a song. If you hear a song over and over again, once or twice a day over a couple of weeks, you're going to really remember that. However, if you just listen to it once for an hour and that's it, and you never listen to it again, you're probably not going to remember it as much. And so that's what spaced practicing can do to help you retain information. Another one of these that I like to really emphasize is elaboration. So when you want to test yourself on a specific topic, put all your notes away and on a blank sheet of paper, practice writing out as much as you know about that specific topic. All the facts, all the details, all the things you're going to want to remember. And once you've done that, once you're practicing elaborating on that, you can kind of see where you are strong with recalling information and where you might need to spend more time studying, because that stuff doesn't come to the forefront of your mind that easily. And similarly, that's almost practicing for a test where you might get a blank sheet of paper and you have to practice doing like a brain dump at the beginning of the exam. You know, you get it, and then you want to write down all your equations, all your facts, all your dates, all the things you're going to want to remember on the exam. You do that right away. And so that's kind of practicing elaboration and also that retrieval practice up there. That's kind of along those lines as well. So if you want to learn more about this, this is from a group called the Learning Scientists. It's up here at the top, learningscientists.org. They're a group of psychologists that study learning. And so it's some really fascinating stuff. And it's nice to know that some of these strategies come from scientific research. All right. So just some more study strategies. The first one that I found I think is really helpful is it's called a 1 hour intense study session. Like I said before, the longer your study sessions go, the harder it's going to be to stay focused and retain information. And the moment you lose focus, the moment you stop retaining information, and then you're just wasting your time. So one way to structure your study time is in 1 hour chunks. Take 5 minutes to prep and figure out what you want to cover. What can I retain in an hour? So it may not be the entire chapter. It may be just a couple pages, or it may be one chapter. It depends on how long it is. Then spend 35 to 40 minutes reviewing it, whether you're learning it for the first time or you're going back and covering all that information to see what you missed the first time or what you remember. Then take 5 to 10 minutes to review. All right, I just spent 40 minutes going over this material. Do I even understand what I just went over? Did I get the key facts, or do I need to spend more time on this? Do I need to put another hour on this subject, or can I move on to the next one? And then take a 10-minute break. Build in your study breaks into your study schedule. Use that 10 minutes to go to the bathroom, get some water, go for a quick walk around the block with your dog. Listen to some your favorite music. You know, use that time to step away from the studying, and then you figure out what you want to do with the next hour. Do I want to study the same subject? Do I want to do some interleaving? Do I want to switch subjects from history to French, or to go to classics? You know, you can incorporate multiple different study strategies at once. I encourage you to practice recalling information. So kind of similarly to, I talked about that elaboration and recall practice, the recalling the information that's going to be important. If that's a timeline full of dates, if it's a graph comparing and contrasting two different topics, if it's a chart of like the photosynthesis cycle, practice recalling those specific detailed info chunks. And you can do that, you know, in a lot of different ways. You can write it down tactilely. You can practice drawing a different graph for the visual, as a visual aid. You can practice reciting things out loud using auditory skills. So there's a lot of different ways you can practice recalling information. And the more different ways you do it, the more likely it is that you're going to really retain that information. I encourage you to use practice exams or create your own exam. I think that speaks for itself. The more often you practice recalling and using this information in a testing environment, the more ready you're going to be to do it in an actual testing environment, because you've already been preparing yourself for this. You've already done it before. So it's not that foreign, and you're not going to have that situation shock that you might be if you've never practiced taking an exam before. And finally, I encourage ambient music. I think that can really help focus if music is your thing. I discourage radio play or top 40 or the most popular music or music you really like to sing along to, because that can become a distraction and take away from your study atmosphere. So you can kind of decide if that works for you or if not. All right, so we've kind of talked about how to spend the next couple of days, weeks preparing for your exams. Let's talk about test day. So you might struggle with test anxiety. A lot of people do. And I am not a licensed psychologist. I'm merely an advisor and here to share some strategies. And if you suffer from extreme test anxiety where you feel it's debilitating to your success, I do encourage you to talk to counseling and psych services to see if there are resources they can provide you to support you in that. But so establishing that, I want to talk about some potential helpful tips. So the first thing I think that can really help dealing with test anxiety is to let go of perfectionism. The moment you recognize that you might get an answer wrong, and it's not the end of the world, the moment you do that, you can stop stressing about having to get that perfect score. So don't go into a test thinking I have to get everything right. Go into the test thinking I'm going to do my best. I've done all this preparation and I'm going to demonstrate all the work I've done on this exam. You can't control what the questions are going to be on the exam, but you can control what you bring into that test. So remind yourself of your past success. Remind yourself of all the work you've done, all the grades you've gotten in the past. If you were happy with those, remind yourself of all the hard work you've put in, and think about how far you've come to the exam. So the test is supposed to be representative of all the things you have achieved. The next tip is some anxiety can be helpful. Sometimes if people feel too relaxed, they tend to lose focus. So the anxiety, a little bit of anxiety might help you stay focused. So you can kind of think that it could be a good thing in small amounts. However, sometimes if you are sleep deprived and you're drinking a ton of coffee, that can simulate feelings of anxiety. And so it's really important that when you go into your exams, you make sure you're well rested and you're not overdoing it on the coffee, because that can, it causes your heartbeat to race, you start sweating, you think you're having a panic attack, and it just makes the situation more stressful. So just be aware of that and make sure you're taking care of your health as a priority as you get ready for your tests. I encourage moving around. You don't have to stay super stiff in your seat. If you need to stretch, you need to wiggle, do what you can to help you make you comfortable while you're taking your test. You can try slow breathing if you feel like you're getting super stressed out. Take a second, close your eyes, take a deep breath in, hold it, take a slow breath out. Do that a couple times, almost as like a mini meditation, and that can help potentially calm some of that anxiety while you're taking your test. And finally, try to expect curveballs. Expect that there's going to be something on there you're not going to know, or that there's going to be a trick question. So that way you're not stressing about it. You're not saying, well, why? I haven't seen this before. I don't recognize this, or they've never asked a question like this. They're going to purposely do that to try to not necessarily trick you, but to try to force you to apply knowledge you've learned in a different way. And so if you go in expecting those kind of questions, those kind of curveballs, then it's not so stressful when you come to it because you knew it was going to be there. You didn't know necessarily what it was going to be, but you knew something like that was going to be on the test. And then you can just go forward and do your best. You got this. All right. So some strategies for actually taking the test. Scan the entire exam is the thing I always encourage people to do first. I think the only time you can't do this is like on the SATs, where they tell you can only go so far. But make sure you look at all the questions you can on your exam. I think I had one when I was an undergrad where the professor at the very end said, only answer these questions, sign your name at the top and turn it in. And if you didn't read the whole exam, then you missed that. And so make sure you're looking at the entire thing. That'll also help you figure out where you need to spend more time. If there are easy questions, get those done with first. So then you can spend time on some of the more challenging questions or short essay questions, and you don't run out of time and miss out on those easy points. Do a brain dump on paper or on the inside of your exam booklet. The moment you get it, write down all those facts that are in your head that you want to remember, and you don't want to forget when you get overwhelmed with the test questions. So make sure you do that the first thing you get when you get your exam or your scratch paper. And again, make sure you read the instructions, track your time. If your classroom doesn't have a clock, you don't know if it's going to have a clock, try to get a little analog watch or something to help make sure you are giving yourself enough time to complete the exam. Again, answer those easier questions first. Remember, it's not a race. I think it's really easy to start panicking when you see people start turning in their exams and you're not done or you're not close to being done. And that could be that this person just really excels in this subject and they're an outlier, or it could be that they just gave up or didn't answer all the questions because they just didn't know and they didn't prepare ahead of time, or they just test differently. Again, it's not a race. This is supposed to be a, you're being tested on what you've learned. This is an opportunity to demonstrate that. It's not about how you've learned in comparison to somebody else. This is you competing against you. So try not to focus on when other people are finished. You have your full exam time. Take advantage of it if you need it. Be comfortable. Try to wear comfortable clothes. Try to keep your environment comfortable. Don't let it be too cold or too hot. Have some water there if you need it. Try to do whatever you can to make sure that comfort is not a distraction from taking your exam. And finally, make sure you treat yourself afterwards. Make sure you reward yourself for all the hard work you've done. You don't have to wait till you get your test back. You put in all the hard work. Make sure you recognize that. The exam will come and you'll get the score you got on it and you'll deal with it then. But as soon as you're done with your exam, make sure you take some time to recognize all the hard work you put in because you've earned it. Now, if you've got multiple exams back to back, you might want to make sure that you're not taking too much time away from preparing for your next exam, but make sure that somewhere in your schedule, you're giving yourself the time to reward yourself for all the work you put in. All right, that comes to the end of the presentation, and I wanted to open it up and see if y'all had any questions about preparing or taking your final exams. And with that, this is my contact information. If you have further questions for me, I am in the Cal Student Success Center. We're still virtual now, so this is my Google phone and my email. Please feel free to let me know now or at a later time if you have questions or you need support or you want to talk study strategies. I am more than happy to do that. I know testing can be a very stressful time for students, and I want to make sure that you are getting the support you need to be successful.